Hi everyone, and Happy New Year to you. Welcome to the first edition of Weather for Weather Geeks in the year 2021. Hope you had a good New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and weekend overall. The weather left a little to be desired, but, we live in Northeast Ohio and Western PA in midwinter. This is what we kind of expect. A very, very cloudy pattern, and it's going to continue for another handful of days. When we look back at the last couple of weeks, only a couple of days in which we saw some sun, but we haven't had a completely clear day in quite some time now. Now, again, that's not real surprising for this time of the year, but it seems to me that this has been an especially cloudy pattern as we've gotten into astronomical winter this year. We live in one of the cloudiest places in the lower 48 states during the heart of winter. From December through February, the cloudy days certainly outnumber the clear days. It's pretty rare to get a completely clear day in midwinter around here. But hey, the flip side of this is we actually live in a fairly sunny area as we get into the summertime, and we get a little lake shadow from Lake Erie, kind of the opposite of the winter where the lakes lead to a lot of clouds. In the summertime, those cooler water temperatures tend to inhibit some of the cloudiness immediately downwind of the lakes, giving us a little more sunshine than some of our neighbors to the south. Looking for some good news this evening. We have turned the corner, of course. The days are getting longer now. It's coming at the end of the day. The sun rises right now. We're at 7:47 a.m. That's as late as they get during the winter season. The sunrises will start getting a little bit earlier later this week and beyond. The sunsets have been getting a little bit later, and I mean a little, over the last couple of weeks. Now the official sunset time in Youngstown, I believe it's at 5:08. And we'll see the day length getting up to the 10-hour mark here this week, and yeah, we'll be well on our way. Of course, we don't see the increase in daily daylight. We don't see that peaking until we get into mid-February through mid-March or so, as we get into solar spring, that glorious 3 months of the year in which the days are getting longer at the fastest rate. All right, a little astronomy geeks this evening. Over the weekend, the Earth, in our annual trip around the sun, reached perihelion, which is the point in our orbit in which we're actually closest to the sun, 3 million miles closer to the sun than the opposite of perihelion, which is aphelion. That tends to occur, or I should say always occurs, in the northern hemisphere summer. Now, as you know, if you're watching this video, chances are you have enough scientific knowledge, you're enough of a geek, that that our proximity to the sun, that 3 million miles isn't all that important. And of course, we're in wintertime here in the northern hemisphere, and just because we're 3 million miles closer to the sun doesn't mean all of a sudden it was a lot warmer everywhere over the weekend or anything like that. Even in the southern hemisphere right now where it is summer, this relatively close proximity to the sun has a fairly negligible effect on the incoming solar radiation and the sensible weather. The reason for the seasons, of course, the Earth is tilted. And right now in the northern hemisphere, we're tilted away from the sun. And so it is winter. And here in midwinter in northeast Ohio and western PA, a lot of clouds today. Nothing more, though, than a couple of snow showers and flurries. Now, I was coming north on Route 11 towards Youngstown right around 2:45, 3 o'clock. Actually, a pretty decent little snow shower along 11 around the Lisbon area. It didn't stick to the roads or anything like that, but it did reduce the visibility for a time. Not much more than a flurry or a sprinkle out there this evening. Actually, for this time of the year, it is quiet across the country. Most of the action's out west. Rain and mountain snow in the Pacific Northwest, down into California and out into the Great Basin. But east of the Rockies, yeah, you could hear a pin drop out there tonight. The weather is so quiet. But yeah, the sea of clouds trapped under an inversion. This is something we oftentimes see at this time of the year. What I mean by an inversion, of course, that's where, usually the temperatures decrease with height through the atmosphere, but you get an inversion, and the temperature actually rises as you go up in height through the atmosphere. That tends to trap things near the ground. Clouds, sometimes you have fog. Sometimes when we have fireworks displays, an inversion overhead, that fireworks smoke gets trapped by an inversion, but it kind of acts like a lid for the lower atmosphere, and it keeps the clouds around. Tomorrow, maybe a sprinkle or a flurry. Into Wednesday, same idea. Into Wednesday night, Thursday, a lot of clouds. But see this drier air by Thursday off to our north and east? This is finally going to make some progress as we go into Friday, and especially into the upcoming weekend. I'm expecting appreciable sunshine finally by the weekend. Where's it going to snow in the next several days? Well, not around here. Nothing more than a flurry anyway, but over the next 5 or 6 days, accumulating snow in the southern Appalachians, south of Dallas in Texas, and plentiful snow in the Rockies. But yeah, the picking's pretty slim around the Great Lakes, which again is a little unusual for the middle of winter. You think of middle of winter around the Great Lakes, especially because they're not frozen, of course. This should be a time of the year of plentiful lake enhanced and lake effect snow, but not in this pattern in the near term. I called this kind of a vanilla weather pattern on social media earlier on. It's not great. It's not a hot fudge sundae, but it's also not pistachio. Sorry to all the pistachio fans out there, but it could be a lot colder here in midwinter, and certainly it has been very frequently. But last year we had 70 on January 11th. Not going to see that this year. Pretty consistent though. High temperatures 2, 3, maybe 4 degrees above the average. It looks like through next week. I showed you this last week. This was the government January forecast put out by the Climate Prediction Center, and fairly high confidence of a warmer than average month. And I acknowledged some skepticism of this forecast last week, given that the second half of the month may be appreciably colder. Now, 5 days later, 5 days after I remarked on that, as we're starting to see the pattern come more and more into focus, it is starting to look like that, it's going to be hard to get true Arctic air into the pattern as we go into the second half of the month even. Colder, yes. A lot of Arctic cold, a lot of harsh cold, maybe not so much. I talked last week about this kind of discussed with a fair amount of infrequency, kind of a phenomenon called a sudden stratospheric warming event, very high in the atmosphere. And you see this sometimes in the winter, and it tends to displace the polar vortex off of the pole, and it'll meander around some of the mid to high latitudes, just off the North Pole. And then, of course, when the polar vortex meanders, the cold air associated with it meanders as well. But it looks more and more like as we get into mid-month, the vortex will be a little more centered over Europe than North America. And so you get all these green and blues here centered more over here. Siberia, Europe. And yes, this is not a warm pattern by any stretch of the imagination in the U.S. It's not the blowtorch we had last January. But if this comes to fruition, I think it's going to be hard to get much in the way of true Arctic air into the pattern. Maybe all the big boy cold is kind of situated more over on the other side of the pole. I think it'll be a stormy pattern. This pattern does look favorable for frequent low-pressure systems moving across the middle of the U.S., the southern tier of the U.S., and if they come together just right timing-wise with some colder air masses, cold enough air masses, we're going to probably see frequent bouts of wintry precipitation during the second half of the month. But will we see the kind of Arctic outbreaks that we've seen in some Januaries, like we had 5-6 years ago, and even a couple of years ago? Probably not. I don't think it looks that way this time around. But of course, we're going to be talking a lot more about the longer range in future editions of the Valley's most in-depth weather forecast video. Thanks for watching the Monday evening edition, and I'll see you same time, same place on Tuesday.